What's the real story? How did all of this come to be? Was it all by chance, or did something or someone design everything? Join us as we learn from our host, William Henry, and discover that the story of the Earth and our universe is really his story.
Welcome to Discovering His Story, produced by Youngstown Christian Television. In this program, we seek to integrate what we find in the biblical historical record with what we also find in the secular historical record. We see where the two intersect, intertwine, and affect one another, and thereby also increase our confidence in the historical accuracy of the Word of God. We've been looking at the ancient time period, and specifically, we have been studying ancient Egypt. We have gone through the Old Kingdom period, the Middle Kingdom period, the intermediate periods in between those two, and then into the New Kingdom period. It's during that New Kingdom period that we find Moses going to Egypt and leading the children of Israel out of Egypt in the Exodus. The last time we were together, we were looking at the location of Mount Sinai. I showed you pictures of Mount Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula, which I climbed, regrettably. But this time, we're going to be looking at, is that really the correct location of Mount Sinai? As I told you before, the location on the Sinai Peninsula was something attested to by locals at the time that Helena, the mother of Constantine the Great, was exploring Christian sites, and as a result, that was a monastery placed there, and it has been the place where Jewish people and Christians have gone for centuries as a religious site. But of the 24 biblical mentions of Yam Suf, which is the Red Sea, 7 geographical verses link it with the Gulf of Aqaba, which is on the other side of the Sinai Peninsula. No verses link it to waters adjacent to Egypt. Most significantly, Yam Suf was divinely decreed as the southern boundary of the Promised Land. So how do we know where the real Mount Sinai was? Well, if we just look in the Bible, we have a very good indication. First of all, Galatians 4:25, Paul mentions Mount Sinai in relationship to where the Old Testament law was given. And we look at the Old Testament, Exodus 15:23. We're told that from the Red Sea they went into the wilderness of Shur, then Mount Sinai. Well, Shur, we're told earlier in the book of Genesis, was where Ishmael lived. The Ishmaelites lived there. The people of Midian lived there, maybe the same people, called the Midianites. Ishmael is the ancestor of present-day Arabs. Ishmael never lived in the southern Sinai Peninsula. The Sinai Peninsula is actually west of his brothers. It says Ishmael will live to the east of all his brothers. So Ishmael lived in the wilderness of Paran, which is not in the modern Sinai Peninsula. So where is the Sinai Peninsula? Well, Paul tells us in Galatians 4:25 that it's located in Arabia. So that gives us pause to think that it would be in Sinai. We have some views from satellite that will show us the difference of where we're speaking. So on the Sinai Peninsula, down at the bottom is present day considered Mount Sinai. But that's if the body of water on our left is the Red Sea. But that's not the only place called the Red Sea. I was surprised several decades ago as I was looking at my Westminster Bible Atlas, which has pictures or maps drawn of everything you'd want in the Bible. And I was looking at the map of this area, and I was shocked to find that the body of water which provides the finger on the right is also called the Red Sea. I didn't know what to do with that. And the further I researched it, I found that that really becomes a more likely spot for the crossing of the Red Sea. And that's because Mount Sinai is probably not in the southern part of the Sinai Peninsula, where we were indicating before, but is actually over in present-day Saudi Arabia. And if we can move in a little tighter, we can see where it is located, and you'll see there that the Arabs who live there actually call that the Mount Sinai of Yahweh. Later on, we'll look at some justification for this idea, but here's how it looks. You can see that this particular mountain is separated a little more from the mountains around it, more so than the Mount Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula, where you cannot tell one mountain from another. And this is quite probably the location of Moses receiving the commandments and of the children of Israel destination coming out of Egypt. Now, that brings us to the next question, and that is, if that is the location of Mount Sinai, and I'll give you some other information later to substantiate that, then what does that mean about the crossing of the Red Sea? Before I go on to that, I want to give you one more bit of information about Mount Sinai being in the Arabian Peninsula, and that is the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament that was undertaken several hundred years before Christ. That in the Septuagint, they state that Mount Sinai is in the Arabian Peninsula, not Sinai Peninsula, as we call it today. The Jewish philosopher Philo stated that Mount Sinai was located east of the Sinai Peninsula. And the first century historian Josephus spoke of it as being near the city of Midian, which is in Arabia. The Apostle Paul also located Mount Sinai in Arabia, as we already indicated in Galatians 4:25. Now, when you think about it, even logically, it makes sense, because if you look at the map of Sinai, understand that in the time of Moses, as today, the Sinai Peninsula was controlled by Egypt. So when Moses was heading out of Egypt, having murdered an Egyptian, he was going to Midian, which is on the other side of the Gulf of Aqaba that we call today, then was called the Red Sea. And by the same token, when he's leading the children of Israel out of Egypt, they're not going to stop in Egyptian territory. That just doesn't make any sense at all. They're heading out of Egypt. And so they would go to the same place that Moses had gone before, and that is the area of Midian. We're told that specifically in Exodus, that he went to the land of Midian. Well, where is that? That's to the east of the Gulf of Aqaba, also called the Red Sea. This is the proposed route that they would have taken. You can see that, and we're told in Exodus, they were at Succoth. From there, they followed what is a wadi, which is simply a dry riverbed, on over to the Red Sea. There is a dry riverbed there. They could have followed that very easily. At some point, they veered south and went down to an area that you can see on this satellite map as a little brown area. You see that little area brown? What is that? That's a beach. You can see that from space, that there's a beach there. It's the only open area in the whole peninsula, is a beach area. What better place for several million people to gather than in that area, having gone through this narrow wadi. Here's the wilderness that through which they went. They traveled through this wilderness, Exodus 13, escaping Pharaoh's army. God told Moses to turn south, so they headed through a wadi or canyon area that is called the Wadi Watir, which led to the sea. The Bible in Exodus 14:3 says, "They are entangled in the land, the wilderness has shut them in," Well, you can see how following this curvy wadi, they would feel like they were shut in. Now, the next picture then is going to show the wadi winding its way to the Red Sea crossing site at a place today called Nuweiba, and certainly would have had the children of Israel thinking that Moses had taken a wrong turn. But when they arrived at the beach, the children of Israel felt trapped. They couldn't turn back, nor could they head north, because at the northern end of the beach was a 3-story Egyptian military fortress, which is still standing today, undergoing restoration. The exit point of the wadi was at this large beach at Nuweiba. Pictured today, it is a tourist attraction, and you can see the wadi coming out from the right where they were entangled, emptying out into this large beach area. So the children of Israel are there. There are mountains obstructing their escape. There's only one direction to go, and that is into the Red Sea. But of course, that prohibits them from going anywhere as well. To the south, the mountains came up to the sea, as you can see in this picture. Josephus mentions that. He says, "For there was on each side a ridge of mountains that terminated at the sea, which were impassable by reason of their roughness and obstructed their flight." This is Antiquities of the Jews, Book 2. You can see the mountains at the beach today. The people were about to turn against Moses because he had led them to an area where they were trapped and would surely die, or so they thought. Also in this beach area, I'll point out that a column has been discovered. You can see there in the center, which is called Solomon's Pillar. And it is a pillar that Solomon put there, wait for it, to commemorate the Red Sea crossing. At least that's what the letters on the column seem to indicate. Here's a picture of the Red Sea from nearby. We weren't able to go exactly to that spot. We went to another beach, and here is my wife Beth in the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba. Now, one of the things that impressed me about this was just how big it is. The Red Sea is huge. I don't know about you, but looking at the Sunday school pictures that we saw, or Bible story books, it just seemed to me like it was, not much bigger than a river, a small lake. But it is a large body of water. As you can see from this picture, you cannot see to the other side. Here's another picture of our friend Craig in the nice warm water of the Red Sea. Here is an area of beach that we were at. You can see all those huts. This is a major tourist attraction for Europeans who come down here for vacation. Here's another view of the Red Sea. Here off in the distance, you can see some of the mountainous areas that prohibit traveling from one area of this beach to another. Now, the next picture is one that I just thought illustrated well what it might have looked like. This is, of course, something that's drawn by somebody, but you can think about all the water, and so much water there all piled up, and how in the great distance you can see a light at the end of the tunnel of water, if you will, and the people crossing. And what a tremendous task! What kind of scary it would be to enter into that with these walls of water on either side. I'm sure that was not without some trepidation. There were some Hebrew Boy Scouts that arrived to help those cross the Red Sea. All right, so from satellite, this is how it would look. The crossing route would have gone from the beach there on the left over to Arabia. So the Red Sea would have been the right-hand finger, as you're looking at the fingers of water on either side of Mount Sinai, which today is called the Gulf of Aqaba. By the way, there's other indications that this is the proper location. In 1 Kings 9:26, we're told King Solomon also built a fleet of ships in Ezion Geber, which is near Elath on the shore of the Red Sea. Well, if you travel to Israel today, you likely go through that city. It's on the Gulf of Aqaba. So this locates the Red Sea as the present-day Gulf of Aqaba in the east. A Red Sea crossing at the Gulf of Aqaba would send the Hebrews into the Arabian Peninsula. Near the midpoint of this gulf, the spacious Nuweiba beachhead stands out because it is accessible from within the peninsula and faces traversable seafloor slopes, albeit with depths reaching 2,800 feet. Interestingly, the mountainous topography surrounding Nuweiba also matches Josephus' description of the crossing site perfectly in Antiquities Volume 2. This is a picture of the pillar, a closer view of the pillar that has been found, which matches a pillar on the other side of the Gulf in Saudi Arabia, in which the inscriptions were more intact. The Hebrew words on this that can be deciphered are Egypt, death, water, and Pharaoh. I don't know, sounds like the Red Sea crossing to me. Apparently, one can conclude King Solomon had these columns erected 400 years after the miracle of the crossing of the Red Sea on dry land. Solomon's seaport was at the northern tip of the Gulf of Aqaba at Eilat, E-I-L-A-T, which is again mentioned in 1 Kings 9:26. And he was very familiar with the Red Sea crossing site as it was in his neighborhood. The Bible even mentions this column. In Isaiah 19:19, it says, "In that day there will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar to the Lord at its border." You can visit the beach today and see the column in person, although our guide thought we weren't interested in pass by it, much to my chagrin. I so wanted to see that. Well, in addition to this column, which would be enough evidence for us to think that that's where the crossing took place, several different divers have gone below the surface and found what are thought to be chariot wheels. Now, there's been a lot of speculation and a lot of accusations made against the first person who found these things, Ron Wyatt, but he wasn't the only one. Dr. Leonard Moller and Viveka Ponton, both of Sweden, also used diving equipment to go down there and found not the wheels themselves, because they would have rotted away long ago, but coral that attached themselves to these wheels. And it appears from the pictures, from what they saw, that these chariot wheels are standing at attention on the seabed. And the next picture shows that the chariot wheel would have had the same number of spokes as used by Pharaoh Amenhotep II. Actually, he used two different spoke wheels, one for his regular army of chariots and another number of spokes in the wheels for Pharaoh and his entourage. And I think both of those have been found down there. Human bones have been found as well. The bones are, I think, of a femur, a femur bone covered by coral. It was tested at Stockholm University. It's from the right leg of a man who was about 5.5 feet tall. It's basically mineralized by resting in the Red Sea for such a long time. The picture to the top left is of a gilded chariot wheel that remains on the seafloor. This fits what the Bible tells us about all the chariots of Egypt, that there were 600 choice chariots or gold veneered models in the army that was pursuing God's people. It's speculated that there were 20,000 chariots destroyed that day. On the above right part of the slide, you can see a drawing of a 4-spoke wheel, chariot wheel, found in an Egyptian tomb from the same time period. 4- and 6-spoke wheels are found here in the Gulf, and were only used at the same time during the 18th dynasty or at the time of Amenhotep II, when the Exodus took place. So Mount Sinai is in Arabia, I believe, not the Sinai Peninsula. All the facts, all the evidence seems to point to that location. And here we see a picture of the location taken by a camera, and then you also see a map of the approximate area, which we already saw on our map from space. Here's another photo, again from space, that shows Jabal al-Makla is where Mount Sinai is. Jabal al-Lawz is a related peak nearby. Now, what was found there had to be found clandestinely. The people that have been there had to do so secretly, because at that time the Saudi Arabian government wouldn't allow tourists to come there and anyone to take pictures. There were several different accounts of people that either accidentally came upon it or were intent to find it and took pictures and smuggled them out. And you can look those things up on YouTube as well. But here's a drawing that was made by one of those who saw the location, and you can see that there is an altar there in the center that was built by Moses. We have 12 pillars that are there, again related, that just seems to be the 12 tribes of Israel. If you look on the left, there's a site of golden calf worship. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And there are boundary markers. Remember, Moses was told to tell the children of Israel that they were not to approach the mountain, they were not to even touch it. And you'll see that boundary markers were certainly assisted in that, but were not necessary. You see at the top of the mountain is rather blackened, which is presumably where Moses was put in a cleft by God so that he could see his glory. Remember, Moses wanted to see God face to face, and God said, "No one can look on me and live, but I'll let you see my glory passing by." And at the top of this mountain, there is in fact a blackened area as if it was burned. And rocks were taken from that and studied as well, and it indicated that it was burned only so far down, and below that was the rock unburned. And here is possibly the cleft between the boulders. There's a tree there now. Above left we see the dozen giant boulders stacked in the encampment area, and they reveal 12 ancient Egyptian petroglyphs of bulls. Now, it was believed the golden calf was placed on these rocks. Large altars are found on the east and west sides of the mountain. What's interesting about this drawing of a bull is that those who are experts in such things say that this was an Egyptian-style bull, and the Egyptians never came into the Arabian Peninsula. So it was somebody who knew how to draw an Egyptian bull who was not Egyptian, and that certainly fits the Israelites being there. So it is here where Moses receives the 10 Commandments. Just as a refresher, here they are. The first 4 relate to how they were to have a relationship with God, and the last 6, how they were to have a relationship with one another. This is quite possibly the rock nearby which flowed forth water. Remember, Moses struck a rock when they were complaining about not having water, and water came out. It's interesting. This is on the western or backside of the mountain. And this is where they encamped before reaching Mount Sinai. This is the location possibly where Moses struck the rock. As I said, there's a giant 60-foot rock on a 300-foot tall hill that has obvious signs of water erosion, yet it's located in the desert. The fissure in the rock is so large that you can walk easily through it. A square 20-foot altar is also at this site, which was built after the children of Israel defeated the Amalekites. The Amalekite territory covered south of Judah and probably extended into northern Arabia, according to the Britannica. All right, so those are the evidences, some of the evidence. There's more. So I would advise you to keep researching and looking. I've tried to look into how it is that so many scholars think that this other Mount Sinai, this other Red Sea crossing is a hoax, and I fail to find any evidence that it is. Instead, I found more and more evidence that it is indeed accurate. Now, you go online and ask about it, you're likely to find people who say it's a hoax because they don't believe it ever happened. But I think the Bible indicates what is the true reality of what occurred, and it's backed up by evidence that has been found there at the Red Sea crossing and in Mount Sinai itself. Now, the Mount Sinai in Arabia, as I said before, was not accessible to tourists. I think that in recent months, the Saudi Arabian government has allowed tourists to come there. I saw a tour recently planned by a Christian organization that usually goes to Israel, also planning to go to this place in Arabia. So it appears that they may be opening up. I think they're wanting more tourists to come to Saudi Arabia. They're looking for some income that way. And so it may be possible that any of us may be able to go there in the near future. Well, let's look back at what occurred in Egypt with Amenhotep III. His army is decimated, and he is succeeded by Thutmose IV, who is, Thutmose IV. He succeeds Amenhotep II, but there's a problem. There seems to be a problem in that there is a dream that's associated with Thutmose IV becoming the Pharaoh. He had a dream. He was laying at the base of the Sphinx, and he was a prince, son of Amenhotep II, and he was hunting in the desert one day, and he stopped to rest between the paws of the Sphinx. Much of the Sphinx at that time was covered in sand that had blown in, so it was largely covered. Thutmose fell asleep, and in his dream, the Sphinx spoke to him, promising the throne of Egypt in return for clearing the sand from his body. Thutmose cleared the sand, and so the Sphinx made him king of Egypt, we are told. Now, if Thutmose or Thutmose was the oldest son of Amenhotep II, he would have needed no dream stela in order to substantiate his claim. He would have automatically been the next pharaoh. What this seems to indicate is that Amenhotep II's eldest son died. And we know that fits very nicely into the 10th plague, when Pharaoh's oldest son did die. And that left the throne open to another son, and this son, Thutmose, who becomes Thutmose IV, has a dream that he's able to point to that the Sphinx, who was highly revered in Egypt, had told him he was to be the next pharaoh. Here's a picture of the dream stela as it is today in front of the Sphinx. Now we know that he was unable to carry out any invasions or extensive military operations after his 5th year, even though his father had a grand army. Well, I hope you found today's episode interesting and challenging to consider the Red Sea crossing and the Mount Sinai, and then what happened after that crossing took place in the lives of the pharaohs. We'll continue next time looking at this dream stela that was erected to commemorate what occurred to Thutmose IV.
Join us as we learn from our host, William Henry, and discover that the story of the earth and our universe is really his story.